favor, say aye. Oh, do we have to do roll call? We do have to do roll call on that. Nick, will you do roll call?
Chair Paw,
Yes.
Vice Chair Squaba,
Yes.
Kelly Bruns,
Yes.
Representative Falconer, Dale Gentry,
Here.
Senator Green, Angela Gupta,
Present.
Bradley Harrington,
Yes.
Nibi Ogichida Ikwe,
Yes.
Greg Qualley, Peter Martiniaco, Rebecca Montgomery,
I'm online.
Kristen Poppleton, Ingrid Schneider, David Schultz, Luke Skinner,
Yes.
Matt Wappler,
Yes.
Gary Wyatt.
Yes.
Okay. 13 ayes, 0 noes. The motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Then we'll go ahead and go over the purpose of the task force and our duties and operating agreements as we do every single meeting. The purpose of the task force is to gather and review information on the impacts of foraging on species resilience, ecosystem health, and other aspects of Minnesota's biomes. Solicitate public input when appropriate and develop recommendations for foraging guidelines. Reduce price foraging permits. Recommendations must be specific, actionable, and consistent with Indigenous and other cultural practices and traditions. The task force must submit a written report to the Commissioner of Natural Resources and to the chairs and ranking members of the legislative committees with primary jurisdiction over natural resource policies. The recommendations must be detailed proposals for changes or additions to statutes or rules. And the duties of our task force is to gather, review data and information, including traditional ecological knowledge and the impacts of foraging, review existing regulations, develop recommendations for foraging activities on state lands, develop recommendations for science-based, including traditional ecological knowledge, and recommendations for increasing public understanding of sustainable foraging practices, solicitate public input, and recommendations for reduced price foraging permits. I think I just stated that twice. I don't know why. Sorry, everyone. There are two separate sheets, but I read it twice. Okay, in operating agreements, I know we say your name before speaking, and I'm one very guilty of not doing that. So try to do that, but if you forget, it's okay. We say that so that people online know who's speaking here. And then when people who are speaking online, we know who it is that's speaking because we're not in the same room together. If online, cameras turn on whenever possible. Come to meetings prepared, review agenda materials in advance, take space, make space. Refrain from side conversations, show respect to members and presenters, be open-minded and curious about others' opinions, viewpoints, and lived experiences. Recognize that time or research may be needed for questions before an answer is provided. Focus on the issue and not the people. Assume good intentions, but acknowledge harm. So we review those things just to kind of ground us in our work. So I appreciate that we take a few minutes in each of our meetings to reground ourselves in our work. And then going forward, this is just a review of our task force meetings that's coming up and also the ones that we have already accomplished. So far, I think this is, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is our 6th meeting.
It's okay.
It's our 5th. Okay, our 5th meeting. And we still have about 1, 2, 3, 4. We have about 5 more coming up, possibly 4 or 5. The next 4 meetings will be really critical because we will be getting into the recommendations and we'll be discussing that in detail and also refining those recommendations. So it'll be very important for us to be here at every meeting if possible for that work. And then we do have listening sessions that are coming up. One of them is today, right after this meeting. It ends at 12. The listening session starts at 1. So I encourage as many of you that can stay to also stay for that in-person listening session, but also being careful that we don't have quorum at that meeting. I don't think we will, but if you're intending to stay, will you please check in with Stephanie so that she knows how many people will be here? Thank you. All right, to our agenda today. So we have quite a few things on our agenda. We're very lucky to have the Wisconsin DNR and the Washington County Department here to join us with some presentations. And then we'll be doing some recommendation discussion as kind of our first kickoff to the discussions of recommendations. And then we'll do a public input in the end, and then we'll adjourn. That's our meeting for today. Let's see here. Can we go ahead and go around and do introductions? We do that every meeting. If we will start on the right, and if you just want to say your name, your role, and organization. We'll start with you first, Professor Schultz.
Hello, my name is David Schultz. I'm a professor of political science at Hamline University, law professor at the University of St. Thomas, and I'm the representative from the Minnesota Foraging Alliance, and thank you for having me today.
Hello, I'm Dale Gentry. I'm the Director of Conservation for Audubon Upper Mississippi River.
Hi, I'm Kelly Bruns. I'm with the Minnesota DNR Division of Parks and Trails, section manager for our resource and asset management program.
Morning, I'm Bradley Harrington. I'm the Director of Tribal Relations for the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources.
Good morning, Nibi Ogechida Ikwe, representing Minnesota Indian Affairs Council.
Morning, I'm Peter Martiniaco, President of the Minnesota Mycological Society.
Steve Green, State Senator, District 2.
Stephanie Klein, Management Analysis and Development. I'm one of the facilitators for the task force.
Senator Susan Paz, Senate District 38, as I guess Senate appointee.
Nick Nero, nonpartisan research analyst.
Roger Scraba, representative from District 3A in Northeast Minnesota.
Angela Gupta, University of Minnesota Extension Forester.
Gary Wyatt, Extension Forester with the University of Minnesota Extension.
Luke Skinner, Associate Superintendent, Three Rivers Park District.
And then I'll have Nick call on those online.
Yeah, do we want to start with Matt?
Good morning, everyone. Matt Wappler with Minnesota DNR. I am the Central Region Forestry Assistant Manager.
And Ingrid?
Good morning, Ingrid Schneider, University of Minnesota, Department of Forest Resources. Apologies in advance. I'm going to have to leave a bit before 11 for class.
And Rebecca?
Rebecca Montgomery, Department of Forest Resources professor, and I'm going to have my camera off mostly because I'm going to be blowing my nose and coughing, and none of you want to see that.
And Stephanie.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Heim. I am Stephanie Klein's colleague at Management Analysis and Development, so also supporting facilitation, and I'll get to be in person with all of you at the next meeting.
All right, thank you, everyone. And I just want to recognize and acknowledge Assistant Commissioner Bob Myers and Mr. John Waters from the DNR for joining us today. They're not officially part of our task force, but we greatly appreciate them being here at this meeting because they contribute to our work. And so we're going to go ahead and move on to the presentations from the Wisconsin DNR in Washington County. We're very lucky that we were able to get both of them here today to do presentations and then do a Q&A with us. We've invited these speakers to share their experience with foraging rules that are less restrictive than those that are currently here in the state of Minnesota. We've asked each of them to speak 10 to 15 minutes. And then after they speak, then we'll go into the questions and answers or questions and discussions, okay? So why don't we go ahead and call our first presenter up from Washington County DNR. And I'm sorry, I didn't get your name on my list here, so I'll have you introduce yourself, okay?
Good morning, everyone. My name is JJ Williams. I'm a Parks Manager with Washington County Parks.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
We were contacted initially to get some information on our current foraging process that we have within our parks. It was new this year. So I'm here to provide some of that information and then help answer any questions that might have. I myself am not an expert forager. I did not grow up doing this activity, but in my position in the parks, I've been able to recognize that it is a significant activity and something that holds a lot of meaning for a lot of people. And we know that it was an activity that was happening illegally in our parks, as it was under our previous ordinance, not allowed to forage in any way. We did not know how often that was happening. We had no way to really quantify it, as it was something that was happening without our knowledge or consent, but knew that it was something we had to look at. We worked with our natural resources team at Washington County and reached out to other partners around the state to see how they were handling foraging activities. We were also fortunate enough to connect with the Minnesota Mycological Society to help get some feedback from them as well. In our most recent park ordinance that was updated last year, we were able to update those rules to allow for foraging as a permitted activity. We do not charge any fee for that permit. We want to make it as accessible as we can. The permit process is in place to help make sure that we can help provide educational materials to everyone coming in to forage in our parks, as well as provide some guidance on where to forage in the parks. Our natural resources team has a lot of ongoing restoration projects or wildlife management projects within our parks. For forager safety, we don't want them in those areas because of equipment that might be used or herbicide that may be being used in those efforts. So every year we designate approved foraging sites within each of our parks to send those folks to. This was our first year in 2025 of allowed permitted foraging. We permitted, I believe, just about 55 we issued for foraging permits. Our staff are currently working on an end of season survey to send out to those permitted foragers who indicated they'd be willing to take a survey, so we can get feedback on what exactly they were able to take out of the park, how it went for them, if they have any feedback for us. It was a little bit more limited our first year doing this in terms of locations we opened up and how we went about it, just because as it was new to us, we wanted to keep some semblance of training wheels on the program, not knowing exactly how common this activity was in our parks already. So we're looking forward to see those results. We currently, with that permit, allow for foraging for fungi, berries, fruits, leaves, flowers, nuts. We just do not allow any root harvesting. And the basics for our permit application, anyone can go in person or online to apply for that application. Really, all they have to do is agree to the county's waiver and then just sign off that they will abide by our guidelines. And it also provides some resources for best practices and some educational information on how to forage and plant identification resources as well. So I think that's an overview kind of where we're at today. If anyone has specific questions, I'll do my best to answer what we can.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Any questions from the members? Mr. Schultz and then Mr. Skinner.
Yeah, I just want I'm sorry, David Schultz. I just want clarification. The permit's free, you said, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and so it's only your first year, so you really don't have any kind of really good data at this point to really tell us anything about how many people or what they're foraging or anything at this point, correct?
Not what they're foraging. We know that we did issue those 55 permits for foraging, but other than that, we don't have great data yet. We're just in that process right now of completing those surveys and trying to get that back.
Okay.
Once we have results, if it makes sense, we can be sure to send what we have maybe back to Nick.
Yeah.
And then kind of show what we learned from that first season.
Okay, follow-up question? Okay, 55 permits issued. An estimate, how many people are visiting your parks in a year?
Our estimate use that we get from the Met Council is about 1.9 million per year for visitors in our system.
Okay, so 55 and obviously people are probably coming multiple, we think they're coming multiple times, but basically 55 permits based upon over 1 million visits to your parks. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Luke and then Gary.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Williams, Question, how did you make the decision about where you were going to choose? So within your park system, you got multiple parks. How did you make decisions about where you're going to, since you're right, you had kind of designated areas for foraging. How do you go about making those decisions about where you were going to allow foraging in the parks?
We worked closely with our natural resources team to look at, in the spring before we opened up the foraging season, where they had planned restoration activities that might be impacted, or where we had sensitive plant life that we might want to protect as we're trying to reestablish prairie, or also looking at our schedule for where we might be planning to do controlled burns in the parks so that there's no conflict with foragers in areas where we might be doing a prescribed burn. So we worked closely with natural resources staff, and they helped designate those areas in the park. And then we just worked with our GIS staff to generate maps that we made public and available for anyone coming into forage.
One quick follow-up. So that's helpful. Thank you. Did you look at the sites of these areas for kind of applicability for foraging itself? I mean, so I know you say with the Mycological Society, others. Did you actually kind of look at the sites for that from that perspective as well? Say, would these be good sites for foraging?
We did, but I would say that was probably the secondary factor after our natural resource operations. And then trying to look at making sure we weren't trying to direct people to forage in areas where we did not think it'd be a successful activity.
Okay, Gary, and then Roger, and then Matt online.
Gary Wyatt. Mr. Williams, a couple of questions, follow up to David's questions. Educational materials, you handed them educational materials, or those were on the website? And if you could share those with the committee, that'd be nice.
We can certainly do that.
And then question on the survey. Have those surveys gone out already? And
they have not. We are just this week in the process of developing those questions and finalizing. So we expect that survey to go out either end of this week or next week.
Might be some suggestions from the committee on different topics you would want to ask. It'd be nice to know ages, maybe gender and so forth. Maybe we can help you with that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Roger, Matt, and then Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Williams, are there other counties that you're aware of that are doing what you're doing?
I know that when we were looking at setting it up, we did look at what Dakota County was doing for foraging. I believe it's allowed in their parks as well. I don't remember right now if there's any others that were currently allowing it from other county systems that we looked at. It was mostly looking at other states and how other places have been managing foraging activities to see what made sense to try and do within our parks.
I had it there and I had to look for permission, and it was, do you use just county land, or is there state and federal land around there that you oversee also in private, or is it just county?
Our operations are just our county land.
Okay. The part that I'm having the hard time wrapping my head around is process. In the state of Minnesota, the game belongs to the state, and the state manages the game. If a county were to say, hey, we got our own rules for hunting, they have to get permission to do that because they serve at the pleasure of the state, as the state serves to the federal government. Last time I looked, I mean, that's how I think things work. Did you have to come to the DNR, or did you to set any of these rules up, or anything up, or is this just all on your own right now?
I know that we reviewed what the DNR had in place within their parks as just a reference to see how it was approached at the state level. This went all through our full ordinance update with our public comment periods. I don't know if anything about that went to the state before it got approved within our parks ordinance.
And the only thing that I'm concerned about is if there's 87 different rules in the state, like if you go from Dakota to Washington to Hennepin to St. Louis to Cook to Lake, are they all going to be different? I mean, is this something? What is, you know? That's where I'm going in my thoughts right now. I'm trying to figure out how to be fair to everything, instead of having a select group saying, well, this is the way we are, the way our town is. And I think that's wonderful. But we as regulators, that's how I'm viewing us, have to sign off on that, have to say that's okay. Or here's your parameters, stay within that and it'll be okay. That way, everybody has to stay within that. That's just a statement. I don't know if you want to comment on it. You're fine. Thank you.
I would say as we try and establish some of these new processes and policies within our system, we try and set it up in a way where it could be replicated by other agencies. I certainly can't speak to if it would work exactly the same for other counties or other agencies around the state, but we've always tried to make it as clear cut and simple as we can so that if others saw it and wanted to try it, they could certainly adopt a similar system. So I guess I can't speak beyond that, beyond what we're already doing at the county.
And Madam Chair, just a quick follow-up. My only concern I have is like if I use deer hunting as an example. If each county had different rules for deer hunting, each one, it would be crazy. I'm sorry, I trying to keep track of it. As a guide, I have to follow all the rules and laws and understand them better than everyone else. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, we're about to go into Dakota County. Here's the new rules for Dakota County, but we're in Hennepin County now. And so I'm just trying to find where our role is going to be in this, what you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Roger. So I've got Matt, Steve, and then Dale. Matt, you're online. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt Wappler again with DNR. I guess I have kind of 3 questions here. First, what type of outreach did you do with those that were wishing to be permitted, and then the reaction or the feedback that you received from those that you permitted? And then are your permits mixed species? You can collect anything with a single permit. And then are your permits limited by quantity? Thank you.
As far as the outreach goes, we did not do a lot of direct specific marketing for this. As the first season, we really didn't know what the numbers would look like and how it would be. We wanted to make sure that it was manageable as we were learning how this process would work. So we did market we had 2 foraging orientation sessions that we ran this year to help introduce people to the activity and to also help provide educational resources. We were fortunate enough to also work with Minnesota Mycological Society on those programs to help rely on their expertise. The updates did get a lot of local press in terms of just it was part of our ordinance update. So it was not something that was hidden at all, just not something that we were specifically doing a big marketing push for in those areas. The permits themselves are not restrictive to certain species or quantities right now. It basically is just people signing off that they will abide by our other park ordinances and policies. They sign off on the waiver, and it does prohibit root harvesting. Other than that, it's pretty open for those other areas. And part of our hope from our initial survey for this season is to see what people have been able to collect and see if there's something we need to look at as we move forward in updating or altering how we're approaching that process for permitting.
Thank you. Okay, I've got Steve, Dale, and then maybe one more person, and then we're going to move to the next speaker. Okay. Okay, 2, 3. How about if you guys are okay? Okay, we'll do quick questions. Just because we want to move to the other speaker, and then we have Q&A, that we could bring them both back up for Q&A together as well. I just want to make sure we get to the other speaker before they have to hop out. Okay. So Steve, Dale, and then I've got Kelly. I know, please, Nibi, and then Peter. Okay.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Steve Green. Couple of questions. You talked about the surveys you did and putting all this together for 55 permits. Does Washington County have a budget for this specifically?
Not specific. It's part of just our parks operating budget that we're working with right now. There's nothing specifically earmarked for foraging.
I'm sure. So do you have a cost on what this is coming out of your budget so far for even the, for doing the surveys, for going out and doing the, in the field, managing whatever it is, following up on the permits to see who foraged what? Is there a cost that you have Even an estimate?
Not at the moment. It really just would come down to our staff time that's gone into supporting this program and the permit process. As far as any enforcement levels go, I'd have to connect with our sheriff's office and see if there was anything specific that they've had to deal with. But there's no specific material cost tied to this for us.
One more. Thank you for that. Then the big issue for me is, for 55 permits, and I don't know that people should even need a permit, especially if it's only 55 people going out to pick berries or mushrooms. But it would really be nice to know what the cost is, and you're running your county off of tax dollars, and so you're accountable to the people who are paying for this. It'd be nice for them to know what it's costing them to run this program. So I think it would be prudent for you to get those numbers down.
Thank you, Steve. I've got Dale Kelly next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dale Gentry. I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the application process. Was it electronic? Was it paper form? Was there what was the process like for reviewing? Could someone fill out the application when they became aware that it was needed that morning as they go out to the park and then forage that day, or is there like a couple days or weeks turnaround? And any just anecdotal feedback you might have gotten from people about the process?
Sure. We want to make it as simple as we could. So it is available to apply for that permit online, along with a lot of our other use permits that we have in the parks for various activities. Once that is completed online, it gets sent to a couple different staffs so that who's ever available can review it first and just ensure that it's been signed off correctly, make contact with that individual, and then send them whatever information they may need. But we also wanted to keep that hard copy paper option available so that, like you had just mentioned, if someone shows up to the park, we have something that we can give them right there. They can read through it, review it, and sign it, and then they're good to go. There's nothing else we would need to do at that point. So they could come same day and start foraging with our permit.
Okay, Kelly and then EB next.
Thank you. Kelly Bruns, Minnesota DNR. I appreciate the fact that you spoke to the resource program being heavily engaged in looking at the landscape before they designated areas for foraging. You spoke about restoration work specifically, and then potentially making sure there were no impacts to rare, threatened, or endangered species as part of that. I'm not familiar with how Washington County looks at their cultural resources and state parks. In Minnesota, we have a wealth of cultural resources that we're statutorily obligated to take care of. And so how did that process work through your resource program? Are you aware?
That's something we don't have a lot of great information on right now. We're currently in the process of reviewing RFPs and working with outside consultants to do a larger study in our park system for those cultural resources. And depending on what comes from that study, that might lead to updates to this process or how we approach it. So we don't have that expertise within the county staff that we have. So we secured some grant funding in order to provide this study, and we're working through that process right now.
Okay, Nibi and then Peter.
Nibi Ogechida Ikwe, representing Minnesota Indian Affairs Council. I just wanted to make a comment that I do know one of the foragers, one of the 55, had reached out to me and said that the process was lovely, easy, greatly appreciated. And the one thing that they had commented was that they liked the fact that the process is very fluid, that we're learning as we go, and we are able to update and do better as we get the survey results. And the person had commented that it was really, you're being a great leader, is basically what they summed it up. Thank you so much for stepping forward and taking the initiative to try to get this good work done and to be a leading example. So I also just want to say thank you, Miigwech and Padamia, also for your good work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nibi. Peter.
Hi, Peter Martiniaco from the Minnesota Mycological Society. I also wanted to thank you. Your staff has been wonderful to engage with. Do you address commercial foraging at all in your permitting process?
Our current ordinance states that the foraging can be for personal use. Our goal with that was to still exclude any commercial processes for foraging. We don't have, I suppose, it defined specifically in ordinance what constitutes personal use. I think we would look at it if you're ever crossing that line where you would be coming in to forage every mushroom that you could find to turn around and sell at a farmer's market or something, then that might be something that we would not love to see. But if it's for coming in for personal use in a variety of ways, then that's what we would encourage for foraging.
Quick follow-up question, or just comment, in reviewing some of your locations, I noticed that there's certain areas, for instance, near some of your facilities and stuff that are kind of out of bounds for foraging, like your visitor center areas and stuff like that. And that's a clarification, heavy traffic areas and stuff like that. I noticed were eliminated, which I can understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So I have one quick question. When you said 55 permits, was that a limit that you set, or was that just happens to be the number of permits that you received, or the applications you received and you gave out?
That's how many we received for people applying for those permits. We did not set a limit ourselves on that. And we were just curious to see how it would go the first year.
Okay.
And then after we finish our review with our surveys, then we would look at any updates we would need to do for our process for either how we're doing it, the permit itself, those procedures, and then if we want to put any additional marketing or resources towards it and how that might look in part of our overall budget and how that funding would look.
Great. Well, Mr. Williams, I want to first say thank you so much for taking the time to come out today and join us and answer many questions that we have as we're working on statewide policy when it comes to foraging. And thank you to Washington County. Please bring this back to Washington County for thinking outside the box and being willing to go into uncharted territory as far as it goes to foraging and exploring, right, to see what works and what doesn't work, and allowing your residents and non-residents to be able to forage in Washington County parks. So just thank you so much for all the work that you guys are doing. And we're hoping that we can learn from your work as well as we are working on state policy. Thank you. All right, up next, we have the Wisconsin DNR, who is going to be joining us online. So I would go ahead and ask Mr. Zinn to go ahead and present first, and then we'll go ahead and do Q&A afterwards.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Zine with the DNR. More specifically with the State Natural Areas Program of the DNR, so that's what I can speak to more authoritatively, I guess. I am on teams that, statewide teams, agency-wide teams as well. So I've been with the Natural Areas Program pretty much my whole career since the late 90s. The first half I was in the field as a field biologist, in the last half of my career, kind of the statewide level, focusing on habitat. And so I think to give it some context too, I think it would help for people to understand that if you don't understand, and I know Minnesota's got an equivalent program, the State Natural Areas Program is really about kind of capturing the best remaining examples of the native communities in the state. And ours is pretty well developed. It's a pretty old program, and we have over 700 of them, almost 700 natural areas designated on both state and partner lands. And so I think the message that probably I'll get across is when you're specifically talking about state natural areas, we tend to be more conservative with public use than, say, the other state properties, simply by virtue of our mission. And so so with that, having said that, we are guided by administrative rules and state statutes. And so I think to one gentleman's question earlier, I think it's fair to say that we're conscious of trying to make as best we can, rules about use on state lands, public use of state lands, kind of universal, so that it's not so complicated for the public. And so I will say that's kind of where our administrative code comes in, and that's kind of the overarching guidance that we have in the state for foraging. And kind of like everybody else, I think we've had this guidance in place for quite a while. We just updated the specific code last year. And yeah, like everybody else, I think since COVID, public use and rec use on state lands has just exploded, including state natural areas and including foraging. So this is really the magnitude of foraging has become really evident in the last couple of years, partly because I also handle the permits on research, what we call research permits on natural areas. And so we're doing our best to try and accommodate it as best we can, acknowledging that we probably don't really have a full handle on how much is going on out there. So for the state, just to be clear, we do not have a permit process. We're basically guided by administrative code. And I was talking to Nick just last week. Nick reached out to me, and I'm not sure if any of this made it across to the members of this panel, but if it helps, I can kind of briefly explain that code. I can share my screen, but basically what it's saying is if
That
you're,
would be great. Thank
would
you.
which would you prefer? Just explain it or share my screen? Like, how about if I just explain it quick?
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, so basically says you don't need a permit for collecting. There's kind of three parts to it. One is if it's edible fruits, nuts, mushrooms, asparagus, and watercress, and it's for personal consumption by the collector, you don't need a permit. You can collect herbaceous plant species that are part of our prohibited invasive plant list, and that's a specific list. And restricted, that's a specific list of invasive plants. So if you want to go collect those and eat those, you can have your heart's desire, what you want there. And then, except for edible fruits, nuts, and edible seeds collected for personal consumption, a person wishing to collect herbaceous plants, including grasses and wildflowers or seeds or nuts, that's a separate process. That's a separate permit process. So that basically captures it. For some natural areas in particular, we're kind of bound by state statutes that basically says, we're not allowed to permit any activity that basically is injurious to the natural values of the property that we're trying to protect. But we're still kind of bound by this overarching guidance about collecting on state lands. So I'll basically leave it at that. It's as simple as that right now. We do not have a permit system. And so thereby we don't have a great handle on how much is going on. But it's what we can do right now.
Thank you. Mr. Zine, thank you so much. And thank you for joining us today. We do have some questions from our members here, and we'll start with the first question. Roger.
Thank you. And thanks again for bringing your ideas to us. Out of all the folks that are in your 700 plus scientific and natural areas, whatever you guys call them, have you noticed damage? Is there, do you think you need a permit system, or is it fine the way it is right now?
Well, I can't say that staff have come to me and says, "Holy cow, it looks like this place is being foraged to death," right? We have, as part of like the last few years, we are getting more field trip requests, like groups that want to lead field trips in natural areas. And I think for us, like again, my specific areas in the state natural areas, it's always contextual, right? So like how many people, what's the site, what's the plant community, what are they collecting, how much are they collecting? And so we kind of handle those separately. And those I have concerns about those. And so we try to figure out what we think is a reasonable limit number of people for those field trips. You can imagine some of our sites are pretty small, and some are the communities we're protecting in those sites are pretty rare with rare and uncommon species. So I guess ideally, yeah, we maybe would have more control about what and where. It's just a volume, it's a workload thing, to some extent. I think the mycological, the mycological community has been one that's actually been really good to work with. We have one of our botanists is a mycologist, and they certainly have been reaching out a lot in the last couple of years about collecting. And so what we're trying to do there is I rely a lot on Jessica for guidance about, what's reasonable, what's okay. And so she helps a lot. But what we're trying to do in return is we're trying to get all especially the mycological groups, to basically record what they saw where through iNaturalist or whatever to help us better understand the distribution of these fungal species across the state. And so we hope that in return, um, that we actually get some information to help us better kind of wrap our head around the distribution and abundance of these species across the state. So there's a bit of quid pro quo there, getting a little something back for it, I will say. But I've had requests for people to lead field trips for like for profit kind of angle, which is different for us. And to be honest, if people are asking something that we're not comfortable with from a state natural areas standpoint, I'll often tell them you might be better off going to a different program that's less restrictive than our program is. So it's trying to find that balance, and it's right now it's hard to know. Um, it's hard to know how much is going on out there. We suspect it's going on a lot, especially given the press as it's gotten in the last 5 years. Does that help?
Yeah, but is the degradation to the land noticeable, or is it,
It's hard to say at this point. Nobody's really, I can't say that anybody's come back and said, and I can't say I personally been to a site that I've inspected and said, holy cow, this place looks like it's been trashed by foragers. I can't say that, no.
Really brief, and I do want to thank you for talking about the folks that are directly impacted by rules, how they're stepping up to make sure that everyone has rules and follows them. The Peters Group, those folks, they have a vested interest in making it work. So I like to think that all of us hunters and fisher people, we do the same thing, but we still need that encouragement from the people that don't know how to do it, and to get those guys on board. So I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Roger. I've got Gary and then Rebecca online.
Gary Wyatt, University of Minnesota Extension. I have a question for you, Matt, on your list of 3 is edible and then invasive plants and then herbaceous plants. Do you have a list of the invasive plants and herbaceous plants you could send Nick? And
Yeah, he's got it.
Are those online? Okay.
He's got it. Yeah, I sent Nick an email with like kind of the relevant administrative code and statutes, and in that there's a bunch of links.
Super. Thank you. And do you recall any of the invasive species list? Is it long or is it just a
It's pretty
couple?
long. So
Okay.
we have what we call NR40 rule here, and it lists invasive species as prohibited or restrictive, and there's certain guidelines about each of
Yes.
those groups, what you can and can't do with those species, and it's pretty long.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nick told me he got it. He didn't send it to us because it's like 20 pages, but he will. So he'll email it to all of us. Some bedtime reading. Okay, I've got Rebecca, and then anybody else who wants to have question after that. Rebecca.
Hi, thank you. This is Rebecca Montgomery. I actually had a question for both people and just in general, and I'm wondering whether or not impact has ever been put in the context of other things that feed on the berries, the plants, the mushrooms. Just thinking about deer densities or bear densities or other foraging organisms and what their impact is relative to the densities of people foraging, and whether that framing might be helpful, or whether anyone's thought in those lines on the management side.
And so if I'm following you, I think basically, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're asking like, is the foraging community competing for limited resources that wildlife is also?
Or if we think like a bear eats 30,000 berries a day, and how many bears do you have in your park compared
see.
to people foraging, and perhaps people's impact is no greater
Is
than other
minimal.
organisms that are foraging there.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Vice
Yes.
versa.
I
I
see
mean,
it.
it could go
Yeah.
either ways. It could be there
Right.
is
Right.
impact, but it could be that it's minute compared to the other organisms that are using these same foods for their sustenance. And
Totally. Yeah. I
I'm
think
not sure
so.
if anyone,
Yeah. So your point is
tried
like
to
the human.
quantify that. We
Yeah.
don't have a lot of impact on human foraging impacts, but I think we have a lot of data in the wildlife community about feeding, deer feeding, bear foraging, things like that, and that might be helpful context to think about.
Yeah. So I'll just say quickly that no, we haven't measured that. Again, because we don't have a permit system. Yeah, we really have no idea how much is going on, but I see your point. Like it could be minuscule compared to the deer problem we have in the state, for example. But we don't know.
Rebecca, are you done? I
Yep,
just wanna
thank
make
you.
su- Okay, thank you. Nibi, and then Kelly?
I was just going to give a comment of how he had spoke of go ahead and eat all those invasive species. I can speak that my family and my community has harvested garlic mustard in Washington County, and it was literally one of the most delicious dishes that we ever had. I just happened to have some buffalo meat that was thawed in my refrigerator. I added that in, and everybody was so excited, and they were like, "Wow, what is this?" And then after I said, "It's an invasive species," and they're like, "What?" So I just wanted to say that sometimes we label as invasive species, but we forget that it's actually edible, nutritious food if we can handle it carefully. And then the second comment is that with harvesting wild strawberries in our community, we had a smaller patch that we like to go to, our personal little area we knew. And with harvesting with the kids, as they would eat the berries and walk back to the truck, our strawberry patch is now ginormous because everywhere they walked, they left a strawberry, dropped a few here, dropped a few there, gifted some back to the earth. Now our strawberry patch goes all the way back to the area where we parked our truck. So I just wanted to share that as a story of how when you harvest in a responsible way and give those little gifts back to the earth, you can actually create more. And then last, the comment of, are we taking over too much and not leaving enough for the bears? I think it's also important and responsible to also take a look at as we are building buildings, do people come about and ask, say, whose habitat are we taking? So, a lot of times we're building things in natural habitats as well. So just remember that, as we continue to move forward, that these are gifts and foods from the earth that if we share them responsibly, I feel like we can do a good job. Miigwech Padamia, thank you.
Thank you, Nibi. Okay, I've got Kelly.
Kelly Bruns, Minnesota DNR. Matt, question for you regarding the administrative rules. And you mentioned that the administrative rules in Wisconsin you're working under right now, this is for personal consumption. Has there been a defined definition of personal consumption? And I thought I recall that Wisconsin did have volume limits in their administrative code. Could you speak to that?
I mean, to the extent I can, like I'm looking at the code right now. And often it's like administrative code, often they'll have links to definitions. This one doesn't. It just literally says these species may be collected by hand for the purpose of personal consumption by the collector. So I think whether it's further defined beyond that, I guess I don't know offhand, but we do go as far as to say, personal consumption by the collector. And I think this was partly in response to thinking about the volume thing. I think it was mentioned earlier, are they collecting it to sell it? Are they collecting it, for a big group they're going to have? And it's trying to maintain some kind of control about volumes. Whether it's defined beyond that, I guess I'd have to look. I don't know off the top of my head. Was there a second part of the question? Sorry.
No, that was it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is there anybody else or anybody online? Okay, so then I've got one question here. Mr. Zine, when you talked about an update to the foraging code last year, could you speak to specifically what was updated in that code?
Well, so it's one of our administrative codes about public use on the public's use of public lands. And so it covers like a lot of stuff, and this was just part of it. And frankly, there wasn't, my recollection is for this specific code, there wasn't a lot. I remember we added the stuff on invasives. That part was new. Um, I can't remember, I think that what they could eat, I think was relatively consistent. I can compare to what we had before, but it's not that much different. So I think the main thing I recall is specifying the invasive stuff. You can feel free to have at the invasive stuff, if I remember right. I can check and get back, but I don't think it was anything much significant beyond that. And the way we do code is like it's an internal team, it goes for internal review, and then it goes out to the public for public comments. And you can imagine anybody that's done policy, some things get lots of comments and some things don't get much comments. And I'll have to check, but I don't recall that this got a ton of comments.
Okay, thank you for that. And when you talk about invasive, do you guys also educate people on transport of invasive plants?
Yeah. Yeah, we have like the NR40, that's our administrative code on that. It has a bunch of information on that. And so if you look at you'll see when you see the email from Nick, it says, let me just read it for you. Possession, movement, and proper disposal of invasive species is regulated under Chapter NR40, and an invasive species permit issued under that chapter may be required unless invasive plants are left or disposed of on site. So we're saying you can collect them, but yeah, if you're going to move them, it's like a different level, and then you have to follow this other code. Because to your point, yeah, we're worried a little bit about taking them and just distributing those seeds to other properties.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Zine. I appreciate you being with us today. Do we have any final questions for Mr. Williams from Washington County Parks before we end this part of our agenda and move on to the next? Angela, and then Ingrid.
Thank you. Angela Gupta, University of Minnesota Extension. So we heard from Matt that they don't know of any negative impacts to the natural resources. I would be curious to hear if JJ has any thoughts about that. And then from both groups, I would appreciate if they have any thoughts about things that they would do differently with the information they currently have. Thanks.
So as of right now, we have not seen any negative impacts for our natural resources from the foraging activities. I know that our natural resources staff are in the parks on a daily basis in a lot of these areas. We have not seen any negative impact from what we've done so far. And what we're learning from that first season in terms of if we'll make any changes will be a lot of it will be advised by our survey results when we get those back from folks, and then have a sit down with staff to see if there's any other administrative changes or things that we need to change from our end for our purposes as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add again that for us, it's kind of hard to quantify. We have some parts like Devil's Lake State Park. I don't know what it is, 3 million visitors a year. Right. And a lot of natural areas are way out in the middle of nowhere. So I think it's hard to quantify. But having said that, I can't say that anybody has come to me saying, oh my gosh, it looks like the foragers are trashing this place.
So the second part was, would you do anything differently?
Oh, well, yeah, I'm not sure what that would be right now, right? I think like a lot of state agencies, perhaps, we all covered a lot of ground. And the thought that we're going to have a separate permit system or a separate group of people dealing with this, it's just not reality right now. It's just not realistic right now. And so I think this is what we can do for now. And if it gets to the point where we really start, especially speaking from a natural area standpoint, if we really start to detect issues, I guess, and then we'll go from there. But until that happens, I just don't see it rising to the level of justifying kind of spending our limited resources on it at this point, frankly. My personal take on it, yeah.
Did we have someone online? Oh, Ingrid online, and then Gary.
Yes. Hi, thank you. Ingrid Schneider, University of Minnesota. I was curious, in Washington County with the permit, does that information include location where the person wants to forage? And if so, I can see where that might be an opportunity to get baseline data and then, track it as people are foraging. Thank you.
Did you hear that?
I think I only caught part of that. It was on the locations approved for foraging, Ingrid?
Yes, not approved, but do you collect the location in the permit?
The permits that we issue for the foraging is system-wide. They're not tied to a specific park or location. We just provide them with our maps on the approved locations within each park. We're hoping to get back from our survey results that people will share on what parks they went to or what they were successful in foraging. And then we'll see what kind of data we get from that and if we need to adjust anything moving forward and how we track those items.
Super, thank you.
Thank you. Gary, and then David, did you want, okay, Gary?
Gary Wyatt, University of Minnesota Extension. Madam Chair, I wonder if we have time on the program today to put together some questions that we maybe feed back to Mr. Williams for his survey, if that's possible. And then, Mr. Williams, would there be a possibility of putting some of our recommendations for your survey in your survey?
There would still be time to do that. Okay. So if I don't know what the timeline would be from your end on getting anything sent our way, but since we have not completed that yet, we could still work things in.
We would do that today.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, and then I had a follow-up question is, the permits that you talked about, were they for specifically individuals or are they also would cover family in that permit?
The way that it's structured right now, it's tied to an individual.
Okay.
And I know that we did have a couple permits that we did issue to minors that we had guardian or parent sign also for that. So that is something we could look at on if it would be more suitable to do a family unit option or something on a broader scale than just that individual.
Okay.
It'd be similar as how I would imagine we run some of our waivers for group programs where you might have a family member sign off for all their dependents as well on that waiver. We could do something similar in that area.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Thank you, Mr. Zine. That concludes this session. I appreciate both of you being here. I know all of us do. And you've given us a ton of information to think about as we think about our own policy here in the state of Minnesota.
Can I add one final comment here? I'd just like to say, since we know that this activity was happening in our parks before we allowed for it as, illegal foraging, and now we've made that avenue for people to do it. Something that I've seen in my career working in the parks is that if we have people in the parks at various times of day, various locations that are there for, a good recreational reason, that also helps with our overall security in the park. Mm-hmm. If we have people that are in there for foraging or fishing or hiking at early mornings or night hours and they see something that shouldn't be going on, they're more willing to come forward and alert staff or law enforcement about that than someone who knows they're not supposed to be there. So in a broader scale, I personally feel like opening up additional uses of the parks does increase overall safety.
Thank you for bringing that up, and you're absolutely right in that respect, because as a forager myself, I do believe that is true. There's been times where I know I probably was not supposed to pick a certain plant. Might be hard for me to report something that I see if I'm holding a bag of plants I wasn't supposed to pick. So thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zine. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and. Yep. Stephanie brought up a really great point, which is that you're welcome to stay with us for the rest of the meeting and also for our listening session if that's helpful to both of you. Thank you. Okay, next we're going to move on to Nick, and he's going to talk about the DNR Q&A and some other information.
Yeah, really quickly, I just wanted to say that there's some information in your packets that the DNR provided, and then we also have some research that both Angela and Peter provided online that was a bit longer, probably best suited for people to look at on their own time. So I would encourage everyone to check out the meeting page for this meeting for extra materials. Happy to answer any other questions on that. And then based on our conversations today, I'll email out the information from Washington County and Wisconsin's own administrative rules around foraging.
Okay, great. And then next up, we're going to go ahead and move into the recommendation discussions. Mina's going to pass around a list of recommendations that Stephanie and Nick had compiled over the several meetings that we've already had. As they've heard ideas or recommendations or things that could sound like a recommendation, they've put it into a list. And so this is what's been compiled so far. It does not mean that these are the recommendations we're putting forward. They're just what we've compiled so far. And sharing this with all of you, go ahead and take a few minutes, 5 minutes to take a look at this and review it. And then I would love to spend the next 15 minutes or so of us kind of discussing maybe some items on here that stands out for you that you think is really important for us in considering as a recommendation, or anything that's not on here that you think it's really important for us to add onto the recommendations list to debate or discuss further. So I'll give you guys 5 minutes apiece. And those who are joining us online, I believe Nick emailed the list. So Nick, you want to talk to the online people, how they can review this list?
I see a thumbs up on Zoom, so.
Yeah, it's been emailed out. You should see it from Mina, and we'll also post it to the website.
Okay, great. Let us know if you don't see it, those online, okay? That's an hour behind, but other than that, is it pretty good on time? Okay, I'm actually running really well. Great, then deserve to send me my run. It could be done right away. I just compiled these if you want to take a quick look. So I see most of our heads are up and we've had time to take a look at this document. Feel free to continue reading it if you're not done. But I would love to kind of start the discussion here with anybody who would like to start us off by either recommendations on here that you really like or stood out for you as something that we should discuss and look into, or anything that's not on here that you think it's really important. And then also you can also say if there's something on here that you think should not be recommendation, that should be removed. And then as we start this discussion, we can kind of narrow down to what the task force members' priorities are when it comes to recommendations, what we think we should focus on and debate or discuss further on any of these recommendations or suggestions that's on here. Okay, so I'll open up for anyone who'd like to start. David.
Sure, David Schultz. And it's both a comment on these comments and more general observation here. One of the things that I think especially look at, for example, like recommendation number 29, talks about dedicated funding to collect data and research. And I think a similar recommendation appears throughout several of the other ones. And as I've listened to all the like the testimony today and over the last few weeks, one of the things that really jumps out at me is a couple of different things. One, I'm hearing a lot more about ideology and belief and very little about hard data. Even today, when Washington County, not faulting them, 55 out of a million plus, if my math is correct, we're looking at, less than 1/2 of 1,000th of 1% of the population is foraging. I hear a lot of anecdotal stuff from Wisconsin, other people saying that foraging is way up, et cetera, but it's all anecdotal. It's all episodic at this point. And so I'm going to make a more specific recommendation. All right. My recommendation, maybe encapsulating a lot of this, is that the recommendation for the legislature is extend the moratorium on rulemaking for 5 years. No rulemaking on this. And in the process, I like what Washington County is doing in terms of a no-fee permit. And use our time for the next 5 years to actually gather some data through the permitting process and surveys and figure out really, what's going on. Because again, I have no projections. No one's giving us any evidence here about where trends are, et cetera. I'm not quite to the point yet of saying, of the old American phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, or we have a solution in search of a problem. But I'm getting pretty close to that right now, is that I'm seeing nothing hard on the table. And so somewhere in all of this, that would be my recommendation in terms of the 5-year moratorium, permit, no fee, and maybe even do some controlled experimentation in terms of areas or something. But we can come up with something to actually come up with real data down the line. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Anyone else? Peter.
I'd like to add something to David's comments, that people talk about that foraging has exploded. So it's gone from 1 person to 2. So that's 100% increase, but it's still only 2. And I think that's, people are, not only as personally, but as land managers, when they never saw anybody before doing it and now they see a person, well, that's a big increase. And I think that that's part of what's, been going on. Has there been increased interest? Yes. And I think that data, I estimate, this is my estimate, and I'm trying to keep it realistic, is that looking at some of the data, they did a survey in northern Wisconsin, and 30% of the population in northern Wisconsin did some kind of foraging in the previous 12 months. Now that's likely berry picking, whatever. They were foraging. But I think the number of people that actually, are participating traditionally, while things may have increased, I think that there's a lot of people out there that have been doing it for a long time, and there's just no visibility of it. And And so I think we need to be cautious that way. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. Steve.
Already? Okay.
Mhm.
I like what David said, except the only exception I would say is I don't know that we need to do the permitting. I do think we need a moratorium on the rulemaking, and let's see how this plays out with the information that comes in. Some of the things on the list really are kind of unrealistic anyway, and how would you even enforce them as far as, who should forage, basically by income? How are you gonna do that? Are you gonna ask somebody for their financial report before you decide whether or not they can forage? It just can't be done, and I don't see that there's a big problem right now. When this thing first came up, my solution would have been simply to pass the legislation, like you said, that there's gonna be a moratorium on the permitting, and I don't think you'd get a pushback from the DNR from what I've been hearing. I think they'd be fine with that and just monitor. I also believe that, I've seen this, I've been around a little while, and a lot of this stuff goes in waves where something becomes fashionable to forage, and then pretty soon it's not anymore. And so I think we're kind of jumping the gun here and going overboard.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone else? Angela.
So the moratorium on permitting is interesting and reminds me of other moratoriums. So we haven't heard of any places with problems, but if there is a place with a problem, I would hate to think that we have prohibited them from managing that problem, right? So I'm wondering if the prohibition or the moratorium would be on only state lands, and I'll start with that.
Yep, Steve.
Thank you, Steve Green. The issue with only on state land, that's where we have the authority. And so that would be a given. But to the other part of can you restate the first part of that? Just so I make sure that I'm right.
Yeah, Angela Gupta, University of Minnesota Extension. Really, I was on only state land makes me feel much better, right? So if I'm a city park, for example, in a highly urban area that really is experiencing trouble, I just want to make sure they can address that trouble, and we haven't prohibited that. Yeah.
Yeah, and as far as the moratorium goes, we are in contact with the DNR all the time. I mean, their presence is here always. And if there is a problem, I can just about guarantee you they're going to come to us with that problem, and we can address that within legislation if the problem comes up. But for right now, it would just be a safer and more effective to say just don't start doing rulemaking, and if you have to come to the legislature, then do that. That's the process.
Angela.
So I do think there's some validity to that approach, and I would just encourage, one of the things that I was excited about, that the aspiration of this task force was to create a policy that could be implemented across. We only have jurisdiction over state land, but that could be inspirational and applied in other jurisdictions. And I think that's still a really profound opportunity. And so I would encourage, if we were to think seriously about a moratorium, then to include a reconstitution of a similar task force in 5 years to really reflectively look at what we've learned so that we can revisit this opportunity.
I agree with you, Angela. Thank you. I just want to add really quick, and then Peter, that I support a moratorium. I don't think that one solution solves everything. The reason why I say that is because there's current rules now that I totally disagree with. And I think we have opportunity to impact the current rules. The moratorium only says no more rules, but it does not impact any of our current rules. And so I would love for us to kind of look at what our current rules are as well and say, what are some things that we can recommend that should change? And then also, we definitely can say moratorium for 5 years as we gather more information and data, and then maybe fund projects to collect that data. And to Angela's point, having a task force come back in 5 years to look at that data with the DNR and say, what are some good policies going forward? So I just wanted to point that out. And then I forgot who was next. Was it Peter and then Nebe and then David, right? Okay, Peter.
Yeah, that actually, my comment was to mirror Senator Paz. I think that one of the things that we need to consider is the current structure of the rules and the current restrictions that are, in the case of some instances, are not workable, not appropriate, and are simply applying existing frameworks to something that doesn't apply to foraging. And I think it's an opportunity here to begin that process of providing those opportunities, because there's definitely foraging opportunities that are currently functionally totally restricted. And while the DNR may have some processes, there's a lot of things that are still unclear within the administrative regulations, and we need to try to address those.
Susan, this is Greg Qualley. I don't know how to raise my hand here.
Hi, Greg. Go ahead.
Hi. I came in a little late. I would just like to echo the moratorium and the review of the existing policies and statutes that regulate foraging. The one thing I thought I heard that was really clear and really interesting was from the county when they said they just have basically the same regulations across most of their properties except where there are certain activities going on. And if we could come to a recommendation on a moratorium and a policy review, I think that would be one of the best things that we could produce out of this committee. So that's my comments.
Thank you, Greg. I've got Nebe and then David.
Nebe Ogechida Ikwe, representing Minnesota Indian Affairs Council. The one that stands out to me specifically is number 22. Very important that we uphold tribal sovereignty and our distinct treaty rights. That actually should be paramount as we go forward. Many tribal members have spoken out to me saying that obviously there would be no public foraging on any of the treaty lands. And many have also asked if we would please consider allowing space for tribal members only, because our way of life depends on these traditional medicines. For example, Kansasa or Kinnickinnick, red osier dogwood, those are very close to our heart, body, and soul. It is our way that we pray and connect with our Creator. So we would want those to be upheld in a very honorable and respectful way, that there will always be enough for our tribal members to connect with our Creator. And then number 15, which was develop a forage freely list for certain invasives or overpopulated species like garlic mustard, invasive mushrooms, and others. I feel that this would actually save money for the state, because we would have our foragers out there basically doing the work for free, and they would be eating it. So it would be giving us nutrition, and it would save money by not having the staff members out there paid to go remove the invasive species. And of course, along with that, education, so that we don't transport the seeds, I think is also important. And I think that can be done very easily, just like we have education for hunting and fishing and other things like that. And then last, as we're speaking of cost, I think it would be interesting to find out the numbers of how much money in budget goes into herbicides and pesticides as we're looking at this. Miigwech Padamia, thank you.
Thank you, Nebe. Okay, I've got David, and then anybody else, just let me know, okay, if I missed you.
Okay, David Schultz again. Just a couple of follow-up observations to my idea here. First, when I was proposing the permit, if there's another way that we could gather information besides going through the permitting process, I'm not at all opposed to that idea. What I'm just trying to figure out is there some kind of way that we can gather information? Now, if it could be surveys, that would work, that's fine. If it's other kind of data gathering or whatever, I think it's important. But I think several of you are also talking about the fact that for a lot of people, they don't know if they can forage or not forage. And so part of it, I think what I want to be able to do here is to let people know that they can forage so they would feel comfortable about asking questions or being educated or something, because I think even our chair has pointed out at one point, she's not sure if she's always foraged, legally or something like that. So to me, whatever is the least restrictive way of gathering that information. And then the second thing, I think Angela makes a very good comment here too, about the consistency issue, and I think we brought this up, or I might even brought this up at one of the very first meetings here about the confusion across the state. And I have to defer to the legislators on this to help me a little bit here. In terms of it, I know we can regulate state property. We obviously can't regulate federal property. Tribal property is way beyond our authority to be able to regulate. I don't know. I mean, could state law come in and say that we can impose rules even at the county level? I don't know what the answer to that question is, or if basically can the state preempt local? I don't know what the answer to that question is. But then sort of my last comment here is that my proposal on the moratorium is to prevent any more rules from going into place till we gather information. Of course, it doesn't preclude the fact that we might want to change some of the existing rules, but still, I'm looking for the issue of what exactly is wrong with the existing rules right now, as opposed to saying, let's just let it go for 5 more years. Again, that's what I'm still looking for. And thank you very much.
I'll just speak I'll answer your question about county and city parks and lands, whether or not state can make rules for it. To my knowledge, and I don't think that I'm not 100% on here, so maybe Steve and Roger, you let me know if you have information that's better than mine. But we could, but I think we would get we could do legislation that would say that we would make rules that county and cities would have to abide by. That would be a new legislation or law, but I doubt we would have county or cities that would be in support of that. I know for sure they would come out like crazy at us, and I don't think we would get the support of most of our legislators. I'll just be honest and say, like, I wouldn't support that myself. I'll be honest, just because I really do appreciate that cities and counties are able to make certain rules and laws that pertain to their lands. Now, if there's certain ones that are more broad, that I think is acceptable, but I would say any recommendations that come here, I wouldn't say, now you got to follow all these, because it's just too much, too many. We can encourage them to, if they like it, but I doubt that something like that could possibly pass, but that's just my thoughts.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up comment here. By leaving the local governments free to do what they're doing, it sets up what? Natural experiments. Mm-hmm. That we can see what they're actually doing after 5 years, and some have changed, some have not. It gives us more data.
Yeah. Steve and Roger, do you have any additions to that?
Well, you're correct, Susan, on that. And not only that, there would be an added cost to the county. And we're already very much struggling in all of our counties, not just rural, but across the state. And that's going to get worse after the first year, much worse. So I don't think we want to lay that on them. The issue with the federal lands, and to address Nee's concerns as well, I don't know that you're going to get exclusive native, because that would be a firestorm. But on native lands, the tribes already have that. I mean, so they can manage that. In fact, for instance, I'm a tribal member in White Earth, and I can go on the White Earth property, but if I wasn't a tribal member, I can't. So that's already taken care of. And so there's that issue, but we do not, as has been stated, we don't have the authority to tell the U.S. Fish and Wildlife or parks what they can and can't do on their property. That would have to be a federal issue. So, but yeah, and so I'm with you on that. I would never impose on counties I like local government, and I think we elect our local officials to manage that. And if they make mistakes, then they'll deal with it in their county.
Roger?
Thank you. Well, that kind of goes back to where I was trying to explain myself before. If you have 87 different rules, it's really hard. Someone has to come in and say, stop this. This isn't going to work. I agree with your individualism. Each county and city, each local unit of government should have what they want to do. Generally, the state says you can be less restrictive, but you can't be more restrictive than the rules that they put out. I've been involved in many planning and zoning issues where, you know, the county says, well, we want to do this. And the state is like, no, you can't. We already have a rule for this. So by us not adopting any rules or doing anything, we are technically letting them experiment, which I think is good. I mean, the word unfunded mandate, just that's what we would be doing. You know, you need to do this. This is what you have to do. And it's kind of the question is why? You know, if the 55 to 1.2 million visits, the math says, what are you doing? You know, and why? But at the same time, some of the concerns about the environment are duly noted, and we should look at and say, hey, is this adversely impacting these areas? I think there's rules already in place for that. I think if you want to walk with your boots from Ridgeway, Colorado, and not knock them off, and then walk in Fort Snelling and bring those invasive species, like, hey, what are you doing? We have rules for that. You know, we don't have to recreate that. But I think where we're going with the foraging is it not only someone brought up the definition, I think it was you, Kelly, the definition of personal consumption, or how much is that? You know, is that something we should be looking at? You know, what's a normal collection of morel mushrooms? Is it a half a freezer? Well, if they got 10 kids, maybe it is, you know, and it's each individual. So for me, there seems to be more questions than facts or answers. So it's really hard to come forward to say, well, we're going to pass this anyway. You know, you have to pass it to find out what it looks like. No, got the wrong guy there. I would much rather step back, say, hey, where are we going? And what is it we're looking for? And then solve these issues. And to NEB, the invasive species, I think that's, you are correct, but the only part that we as a citizen should teach people that they are invasive because they get spread. So if you're going to pick them, put them in the bag and seal it, and then walk to where you're going to clean it and eat it and then get rid of it. That's just education. That's not saying don't do it. It's like, if you're going to do it, then do it the right way. And I think that's important, that we try to get the populace to see that, hey, this is real. This isn't really hard. You just got to do it. And that's all. So
Thank you,
Madam
Roger.
Chair.
I want to address one more question that David had posed, and then we're going to go to Angela. David, you talked about, is there other ways that we can gather information or survey? And I think that number 21 as a recommendation there is a perfect way to do that, which is adding a survey to existing licensures. So like for hunting, fishing, trapping, if we can add to those surveys some questions about foraging, I think that would be a great way to get information because we don't have a list for foragers right now, but we have a list of people who use public lands for other reasons. And oftentimes they'll also, if they're using it for one reason, they'll probably use it for another. I remember just about 2 weeks ago, I got a survey through my email because I have licenses for fishing and hunting. I can't remember which one it was that I got a survey for, but it was a survey. It said, could you take a survey because you have this license? And, I think it was hunting actually. And so I thought that was great. And if we can add some questions in there about foraging to those existing systems that we already have, I think that'd be a great way. Thank you, David. Angela.
Thank you. Angela Gupta, University of Minnesota Extension. three comments, I think. So I love the idea of taking this opportunity to offer a voluntary recommendation for good policy. And I really like the Washington County policy and the Wisconsin DNR. And so I wonder if we could review those. There seems to be a lot of overlap with those, and then put that forward as a potential recommendation for communities that are looking, or institutions that are looking to change or improve. They're very complicated, or sometimes they're not even addressing it. It's in other spaces. If they want a template, I think we could provide that. Within those, I really like the idea of essentially open access within best management to limit spread of invasive species, destructive removal of invasive species, and opening up to non-native species. Like, no one is dying to protect dandelions, for example, or many non-native mustards, yet they're not actually considered invasive. So I think those could be included. I just want to remind folks, I think I said this before, the University of Minnesota Extension is likely to pursue a certification education program for foraging. And so that, I think, would be an easy way to include all of this education. We often have a sliding scale for payment. So tribal members are generally free upon request, as are need-based people. So just want to remind folks. And then the nice thing about University of Minnesota Extension is we institutionally do a lot of evaluation and survey development within those programs. So that might help to fill in the information void. And then I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of personal consumption, but every time we talk about it, I'm like, I wonder if my gifts to the group count or don't count as personal consumption. And so food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. And then I can't remember what the thing is, or who was next. I apologize. I lost where I was on my list. So I'm going to say Nibi, Peter, and then Luke. Is that okay? And then whoever else signal.
So my comment is back to number 22, upholding tribal sovereignty and distinct treaty rights of considering allowing space for tribal members only. I do believe that we do have the authority to give preference in education to people. Educate them that these sacred medicines are very important to the tribal people. Not to say you cannot specifically go there, but please hold a space in your heart as you're in this area to not take too much, because these are very sacred to the tribal members in the area. So I'm just asking for education so that those medicines remain there as a gift from our Creator forever for the next 7 generations. So education is very important. And it also is beneficial to all, because then we're learning about each other and we are stronger together. So education on the tribal medicines, I think, would be a great way to address what Senator Green was speaking of. Miigwech Padamian, thank you.
Thank you, Nibi. And I just want to second you really quick that I absolutely think that we have to consider the sacred medicines and plants that our indigenous tribal members use for the traditions and cultures, because I understand that as someone who, in our culture, we use certain plants as well. Maybe we can start thinking about putting limits on those instead of saying outright prohibit it, by putting limits on regular people foraging those to make sure that there is still always going to have. This is just an idea. Of course, I'm open to other ideas too. And then for tribal members that we don't have that same limit for, there isn't a limit, but for others, one, education, two is setting limits to say, this is only how much you can collect, to make sure that there's always going to be that available to our tribal members, indigenous people. Yeah. And then I have Peter, Luke, and then David.
Yes, this is Peter from the Mycological Society. Yeah, I think education is such a huge part of this, and I really appreciate, Nibby bringing up, the cultural education, because I don't think there's any foragers that I've ever met that want to risk overharvest, honestly. They believe that this is about protecting the resources. And as far as the stuff on county lands, what my experience has been is that we've seen changes around the metro area in the last 5 years for accommodating and giving more foraging opportunities. And what was in place previously was just default bans on picking up a rock, on scratching a groove in the sand. I mean, any disturbance in natural areas, you look at most county regulations in their parks, they say you can't do anything. And it basically says it just that way. It doesn't pick out that you can't pick blueberries. It doesn't pick out that you can't do this. You can't do anything. And as a general rule, and we're seeing those things change. And I think we have an opportunity here to provide a template with the help of places like Washington County and stuff, and the other counties in the metro area that have decided to start opening up opportunities to say, hey, here's a template. Here's something you can use. You have citizens that want to do this, because I guarantee it's happening whether they're allowing it or not. You know, you have citizens say, hey, let's change the rules. Now they have something to look at and say, well, okay, we've got, you know, guidelines, we've got stuff, and it's an experiment, as David points out. And some of this that we're proposing, it has some experimental parts to it too, because we don't 100% know what's going to happen. But I want to point out that if we look beyond our little world in North America and look around the world, some of this stuff has been going on for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years. Foraging is probably the first part of human survival, and we haven't. There's other things that we've done to destroy our world, and foraging hasn't had a big impact on that, I don't think. And I think we can be pretty sure that we're not too far in the mud on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I've got Luke and then David.
Yeah, Luke Skinner, Three Rivers Park District. Just a couple of reflections. As I reflect on our charge and the legislation that brings us here today, and being someone who's from a park district that as a quasi-county, as a local unit of government, I think our charge is pretty clear. This is focused on state lands. And I agree with Senator Green that there would be a lot of pushback if you try to expand it beyond what the current and what the legislation actually puts in place for us, what our charge is here today around state lands. For me, that helps me focus, right? It helps me focus on what our recommendations are going to be. If we try to keep expanding it and going beyond what that is, it's going to muddy the water. So I appreciate the idea that we focus on that. We also have listening sessions coming up. We have 4 of them more, and I'm really curious to hear what comes out of those listening sessions and feedback. My guess, a lot of it's going to be on the value and the interest around it, not probably focused on specific recommendations. I am really interested in the difference between what is actually in rule and then what is actually in legislation and statute, and what can be changed and embedded. So going back to Mr. Schultz's recommendations of early or some sort of moratorium, I would like to really be clear about what that means. What are you actually talking about? I mean, not personally, but about what a moratorium would actually mean, because there's implications to both rule and to statute that you can't just put a moratorium in place unless you actually go and do something legislatively to do that, right? Because the rules and the laws stand currently as they are. So for me, I'm thinking process a little bit, and I'm thinking about where we want to get and what those recommendations might be. Again, from a Three Rivers Park District perspective, Peter and I have chatted about that. I am ultimately interested in what happens here, because this will have a reflection, and we are paying close attention to what's happening in Dakota County, Washington County, and across. We are very interested to see how we can change, as well as one of those agencies right now that do not allow a lot of foraging, if any. So I think for me, as we move forward, I appreciate this early conversation about what that recommendation might be, and I will have more coming down the pike. But some clarification around this idea of a moratorium, what that looked like, and how would that actually be implemented across the state would be very helpful.
Okay, thank you, Luke. David.
Sure, David Schultz. Just two quick observations, not on your question here. That has to be fleshed out, obviously, about the moratorium here. But two quick things here. Depending on what direction our recommendations go, one is, and I think it's right. It's state property also here. Are we going to want to have a policy that addresses state residents versus non-state residents? Now, again, if we were doing a permitting, I'm pretty sure, I'm not a hunter or fisherman, so I have to defer on this, but I think we allow out-of-state people to get permits, for hunting and fishing in the state. But again, we may want to think about, that direction. And then the second thing for us to be thinking about here, I'm not sure if it's called a recommendation, suggestion, whatever, is something that thinks about what's the impact of climate change going to have upon the foraging in the state of Minnesota? We've largely not talked about that at all in terms of, are we going to become more hospitable, less hospitable for foraging? I don't know where that fits in here, but something we should be thinking about somewhere down the line here. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I've got Dale, and then anybody else, let me know.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Dale Gentry with Audubon. Just trying to put my thoughts together about everything that's being said. I have not, as a wildlife professional, I haven't seen any evidence that foraging is having a negative impact on wildlife populations. Certainly individuals, I'm sure that happens. I am interested in rare plants. That's outside of my expertise, but I guess I would like to see maybe some sort of study done or a specific case that we're concerned about where we can manage before we just create new policies that become very restrictive just in case of something that, so that's just my thought. I'm really supportive of the idea of a moratorium on new rules. I think if it's compatible with that, I like the idea of a no cost or very low cost permit. I think that conveys the idea that you are impacting the land, not impacting it maybe in a really terrible way, but that it's a privilege and we want to understand it and we want to support it, but we also don't want people to think that, just have at it. And I think that will, hopefully, if we do that well, clarify this whole personal use versus commercial use issue, which seems to be over so much of our discussion. So I like what Washington County did. I think it's great. I think if we could do something like that as a way to collect data, convey that this is a good thing to do, but that, that there's, I don't know, the message that if not regulated could become a negative on the land. I don't know where that goes, but anyhow, I'll stop yammering.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dale, for that. Okay, I've got Bradley and then Peter.
Hunting, Bradley Harrington. So I'm starting to see it's getting close to a real good time to let the tribes know what is going to be looked at going forward. There is a part of our work here that revolves around what's known as TEK, and we did hear examples of that from one presenter that had been brought in. And with tribes being impacted with any of the rules that we come out with, whether it's rules saying that we're going to make rules in the future, there's still going to be an impact there, and getting some official insight from the tribes themselves, it would be a very good opportune time to do that as the idea is developing, as what is looking like is starting to come to, especially if this is going to be a much longer discussion than what was seemingly originally planned, like even up to at least 5 years. That's going to be the least of it, and then all the discussion moving on. This can actually turn into a decades-long discussion when we're talking about anything having to do with harvesting. We know that there's been centuries-long discussion on even around fish and deer and so on. And then in ceded territory, the public land that the state holds in ceded territory is actually areas where the tribes are able to make their own regulations. Also, we see that in the 1854 and 1837 ceded territory where myself, as a Mille Lacs band member, I gotta follow in regards to fishing off the Mille Lacs Reservation in the 1837 ceded territory. The Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife sets my regulations, even as not just fishing or hunting, but there's also some around bows even, and then even gets down into some guidance around what we're talking about here in foraging. So I see it as a really good time to put together a outreach plan to get the information to tribal leadership with a few options to be included or involved in some of the work, whether it's regular communications sent out, but we're definitely going to be looking for official feedback that's going to feed into the community. So, Miigwech.
Yeah. Thank you, Bradley, for bringing that up. I do just want to add that I will be attending the MIAC meeting that's happening on December 3rd. And we'll be giving some information, update about our work with them, and then also seeking input from them as well. But I think it'd be really important for us to be able to get the kind of input we need and get their thoughts on things to have questions that we can ask them specifically and say, what are your thoughts on this? And I'll look to Bradley, you, Nibi, and anybody else here for like some questions that you think would be good to put forward to the tribal leaders to see what their input is to that. And something specific could be exactly to what Nibi had brought up, which is, how about those sacred tribal medicines plants? How do you feel about that in our state parks? Like, what are your thoughts when it comes to that? How should we do that? Other questions that we want to kind of pose for input, I think it'd be really great. I'll need all of your help to kind of think about some of those things that we want to learn from them. And then, of course, anything they want to contribute. And then I'm working with Bradley, and I appreciate his help with trying to get a meeting or a trip up to Upper Sioux to try and get some input as well. But also any other ways that Nibi, you or Bradley or anybody else think it's a good way to engage our tribal members and leaders into this process. That it's really, really important. And in that regular update, I think it's also really important. We have not updated them to our work so far, us as myself or Stephanie, other than asking for that first meeting of the MIAC meeting that's happening December 3rd. And so hopefully through there, we'll learn some information that we can bring back to the task force. Okay, but I'm open to other ideas. Nibi.
It would be nice if you could extend them an invite if they would like to come and speak as well as a presenter, or if they want to send a representative to speak for them. I think that would be a very kind gesture to allow them time.
Yeah.
Miigwech, Ptamia, thank you.
Thank you for that suggestion. I definitely will do that. And then let's see here. I have Peter next.
Yeah, this is Peter from the Mycological Society. I just want to follow up just because Luke brought it up about the listening sessions. I've had a number of comments directed through some of the DNRs, communication and stuff like that, that there are members of the public that really wish we would hold a listening session not during the workday. And I'd like to throw that out there because I think it's really important. The number of comments have been, I would say, fairly significant that said, oh, I would like to provide input, but I can't do it with the schedule that currently exists. So I'd like to throw that out about the possibility of doing something in the evening, perhaps after the 3rd. I don't know, when is our next meeting?
Our next meeting is the 2nd.
Oh, it's the 2nd, and then we have one again,
Oh.
like in December, the
Another-
16th or something like that. Well, between the 3rd and the 16th, perhaps.
A quick question, logistical question for you. Do you have a sense of like what time would work? Like, is 5:30 good? Is it, does it?
I would
need to be
say,
like 8
I would say more like some of the things that the DNR does, like 7, 6:30, you know. I mean, I know it sucks for for staff and stuff and people who spend all day on this, but I know.
That's helpful. I appreciate you sharing that. The reason we didn't initially is because with some task forces we've helped with, like kind of nobody's shown up to the evening ones. So we thought, let's start with the ones that are at different times of day and then see if we hear what
And-
else is needed. And now we're hearing.
And
about
I
the
think
person who set that.
I think it's clear that maintaining that as a virtual is probably fine. Okay, that's all.
Peter.
That's all I have.
We'll work on that. Thank you. Anybody else that I might have missed? Or anybody online? Okay, great. Well, we're good on Nibi.
I would also like to, if we could publicize the email address that and none of the times work for them because they're busy with family and other obligations, if we could publicize where they can write in their comments to be counted as well. A few people have asked me for that, and I did direct them to Nick Nero, but I think that that would be more beneficial if everybody was aware that that was another option. Miigwech, Padamia, thank you.
That's a great point. And, actually, we could probably create a Google form in which we can get input from people. If they're not able to attend, and they can just fill out the form with a number of questions and then whatever else they'd like to give. Okay, great. All right, so we are ending we've got about 5 minutes for our time. We're good on time. And so next steps, I just want to say that we do have the listening session at 1:00. And it is in person. We do not have a virtual option for this one. Everybody is welcome to join us.
Today's session will be recorded though. So anyone who's not able to stay can watch the recording to see what everybody has said.
Yep. And then 3 of our listening sessions will take place before the next meeting, and those will be virtual. Our next meeting for the task force is primarily going to focus on recommendations. So our homework before that next task force meeting is to maybe look even deeper into these recommendations and really pick out your top priorities that you think are really great. I think we heard a lot of it here already. And then anything else that you think we might have missed, we're going to try and compile a list of what we think we really want to focus on. So come prepared with some of that. We'll probably try and use some of our 5 to 5 to eliminate some of the recommendations or at least prioritize some of the recommendations so we know what we'll be concentrating some of our time on in discussing. And then let's see here. Oh, I do remember, I think Gary had asked the Washington County, Mr. Williams, if he would be open to some survey questions or additional questions. So if anybody has any input, let Nick and Stephanie know, and they'll make sure that we get that over to Washington County. That's all we have. And then now I'll just open up for public input in case we have anyone in person or online with us that would like to give public input. We do also have a listening session starting at 1 for public input. I encourage people of the public to stay with us for that one. But I do want to open up this time for public input if there's anybody in person or in person can step to the podium there, and online, put your hand up. Looks like we have someone here in person. If you can introduce yourself and then go ahead with your comment.
Madam Chair, members of the committee and Council of Advisors, thank you very much for this opportunity to share a few thoughts with you regarding this issue. I was delighted to see how you're wrestling with this issue. There's an awful lot going on here, and I hadn't thought all that much about it. I would go out to the forest, natural area with my family. We might pick up a berry now and then, and we never thought much about it. And that's the way it has always been. In the same way with the hunters and the fishermen and all those. But then something's changed not too many years ago. One of them mentioned 5 years ago, something significantly changed, observational. And Professor Schultz was talking about data. I'm thinking, well, I'm not aware of any data regarding foraging issues or harvesting issues. I guess you could call them that if it gets overdone. And I've seen that change happen in my own house, where we have grown apples for years, and then once started maybe 10 years ago, one morning all my apples were gone. And I said, well, how could that be? And a couple of years later, sometime our trees mature at different times. The ones that were ripe, they were gone. And then now and then our tomatoes would go. And we said, what's going on? Because this has never happened. And we go out to the woods and we see more people. Our woods, our natural areas, we've heard it before, they're all overloved. When Minnesotans in the country loves to come to Minnesota because we have a lot to offer in the natural area. But I'm sorry, I could talk on for quite a while, but two things or three things I want to say is, first of all, Chairman Susan, Senator Paul, you're my senator, and I'm delighted to see you with this subject right here. I'm very happy to see that. I'm a member of the Friends of Minnesota Scientific Natural Areas. I'm not speaking on their behalf. They submitted testimony to you. And it was, in short, it said protect our SNAs. And I would add a footnote to that because there's a long list of SNAs proposed. And the DNR has that list. The Friends has the list. It's 100 and something long. And we all know the SNAs, they have these endangered species. They have critical elements of all sorts. I mean, from geology to plants, they have to be protected. Contrary to what Professor Schultz would say, I know he says, we don't have a moratorium. You have to protect those. In any legislation you have to protect them. And you have to include the list of proposed ones. Because once those apples are gone, it's gone. You have to do that. And we can talk about all these other things, and you will, and I'm really happy to see that. But my emphasis is, please, by all means, protect our SNAs. And you might want to throw in some of the WMAs as well, because these are important natural history areas as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And before you leave, could you state your name for the record?
Sorry.
It's okay.
Dale Erickson. I'm from Brooklyn Center.
It's good to meet you, Dale. I'm glad I'm your senator. Please contact me if you need anything. Okay, thank you so much for that. Gary, did you have a question?
Yes, hi, Gary Wyatt, University of Minnesota Extension. One more assignment for Nick, maybe. I think Mr. Williams from Washington County mentioned that Dakota County has a foraging practice. I'm not sure if we have that information, but it'd be nice to reach out for Dakota County and get their information on how they have permits or don't permit, what their policy is on foraging in Dakota County. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. And do we have one more person for public input? Go ahead and please state your name.
Good morning. My name is Samantha Gabriel. I live in Oakdale. Thanks for this opportunity. I've been a forager for probably 15 years or more. I've lifelong Girl Scout, love the woods. This year I was lucky enough to share foraging with my little grandkids who are 5 and 7 and couldn't get enough. It's just a great thing. Education is just so much a huge part of this. Even though I've gone foraging for 15 years, Every year, I go out with professional foragers once or twice a season, always learning new stuff. I actually, even though I foraged for so long, just this morning sitting here, I just became a member of the Mycological Society. So I felt it was a perfect time to finally make that leap. I will just share one thing that it's really interesting when you're in the woods a lot. I do frequent a real popular state park across the border. In the last couple years, that state park decided to add a bike trail through the state park. Great thing for bikers, not for foragers. So everything takes an effect on it. You know, the foraging, again, I'm in the woods a lot. I don't see a lot of effects of people. I know when this started, it was a lot of people who hunt morels in the spring, in the metro. Are there trails that are made during that time and then they kind of disappear throughout the season? Yes. When you're a forager for the whole entire time that there's not frost and snow on the ground, it's really, I would agree, there's not a lot of trampling down through the season. David, I really appreciate you saying that this is a solution looking for a problem. That's exactly the feeling that there is a problem maybe in the springtime, certain places, certain foraging. But for looking at the season of foraging, the benefits of it, foraging with your kids, your friends, your family, just really outweighs all of those other, those kind of things. So I appreciate your time. Thanks, and enjoy the outdoors as much as possible.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I do want to encourage both of you, if you have time, to stay with us for the in-person listening session too, that starts at 1:00, so that we can even hear some more from you on your thoughts on foraging. Thank you. And I don't see anybody online for public input, so I'd like to go ahead and just adjourn our meeting today. I apologize for the overtime, but thank you everyone for staying with us. Yes. Thank you for that, by the way.